is slow to I'll start without PowerPoint, because I never use PowerPoint, it's the lesson and all this. Absolutely delighted to hear Rosa. They're like stand-up comedians, aren't they, these journalists? That's the kind of alternative career. Fantastic stories, fantastically funny. I want to start by saying a little bit about my background. In a way, this is part of careers. And I went to the careers office when I was a teenager in a place called Kendal in Lake Street. And I went to actually the French teacher, who was a careers master. And he knew nothing about anything really about French. But I came out and I was going to be a town planner. And I thought, well, that's very interesting. But I was a bit disappointed at times. I wanted to be a rock musician. And I came around and told them that I was going to be a town planner. So that's nice. One of those. I don't really know. Anyway, I went on to be a rock music promoter and musician and worked in theatre, and I was a journalist, and got involved in the arts, and worked here in Hull for 5 years, and did some interesting things, went on and developed lots of big cultural buildings in Newcastle, and been chief executive of different cultural organisations. And about 4 years ago, somebody asked me to be the keynote speaker at the Royal Town Planning Institute annual conference. And I suddenly realised that actually what I'd done in my career was being a town planner, and that what I did was plan cities and places through culture, and told the stories of cities through the arts and culture. In a way, it's a sort of journalism. It's about finding the story behind your city, finding what places are about. So I'm quite happily introducing myself now as a town planner. But really, my job has been to advise Hull on city culture, and it's been a fantastic journey, and I don't know how many of you have sort of followed it from the start, but Hull bid to city culture 4 years ago and didn't even get on the shortlist. So this time, we had to get it right. We had to make sure that Hull won. This was the image we used on the front of the bid, and it was about showing the people of Hull come out, and that Hull is a city, a fine city that whose reputation has not been understood by the vast majority of the population. I got quite emotional the day after the decision. I wasn't terribly emotional on the day of the decision, but the day after the decision, I opened up the newspapers and started to read Rose's article, and I read Paul Heaton's article in the Daily Mirror. And what I was hearing was sheer passion of people. And if you can write with sheer passion, you're going to touch the lives. And certainly that morning I was touched by Rose's piece, and I was touched by Paul Heaton's piece from Beautiful South. And City of Culture is about touching people. So I wanted to cover today a little bit about the vision of the bid and the impact today, because what this was an exercise in a city telling its story, bidding and delivering, and getting a city behind a bid and behind something. We did a workshop to start off the city culture process, and I asked people to bring in an object that summed up the culture in the city now. Really interesting things came in. Somebody brought in a glass paperweight with lots of bubbles in it and said, actually, this is the city. You know, there's lots of different communities. There are East Hull, West Hull. They never come together. Could City of Culture bring them together? Somebody brought in a picture of Larkin's lamp, the poet's lamp, under which all his work was written, and when he died, the creativity was switched off. How could we switch it back on? And there were all these really interesting objects. But there was one which was a medal of a football tournament in Bransholme, and it was on somebody's mantelpiece. And the point of the object was that actually the thing about Hull is it's quietly proud. It doesn't shout about things. Liverpool's lippy and loud. Leeds will tell you fantastic things about the city, and actually it's not a particularly attractive city. But Hull is quietly proud and doesn't really kind of shout about itself. But in this instance, for once, Hull had to shout about itself, because that was part of the journey and part of winning City of Culture. So I'm going to talk to you about the story of how we did it. And we started with a poem. We started with Philip Larkin's Days. Days are to be happy in, but actually not everybody is happy in Hull. Hull's got a lot of challenges. It's got a lot of poverty. It's got a lot of issues around education attainment. So we positioned our bid to be the serious bid. Our bid was about making a difference to a life in the city every day in 2017. And not just in the city, but in the UK and in the world. And how could Hull
which has made huge contributions to the world over the decades, do something in 2017 which resonated across the whole of the UK. And we hit these issues head on, education, jobs, skills, because some of the other cities were bidding and they were bringing down celebrities. They had Billy Connolly in Aberdeen, they had Tom Daly, for some reason, the diver in Plymouth, and we didn't do celebrities. We didn't ring any of the celebrities up because we were positioning ourselves as the serious bid. We called upon our friends that were alumni to help us in different ways, but we didn't use celebrities because we were trying to tackle all these issues, and there were lots of stories, therefore, to be written about Hull as the serious bid. And we were turning all the negatives that had been written by national journalists. I was going to ask Rose the question, why is it that national journalists always come to Hull or Newcastle to write the negative story? We were trying to turn that round. And so when we'd put the draft bid in, we sat down and said, right, who do we go to write the serious stories? How do we get this project positioned properly nationally? Because this was also about doing something for the profile of the city. Hull's had, for 400 years, it's been put down by a poem called The Beggar's Litany, from Hull, Hell and Halifax, good Lord deliver us. How many people have heard that? From Hull, Hell and Halifax, good Lord deliver us. Well, that's 400 years old, and actually people have been saying that for 400 years. And then there's been the cracked towns, and there's been all the stuff that's been written about that. So what we were trying to do with the bid was to turn that on its head and find a way of telling people the story of Hull, getting them to the city, because the city sells itself. It's a beautiful city. Part of the bidding, you had to prove you had a track record, and actually Hull does have a great track record, and it's lots of cultural events, lots of cultural activities. It's got great alumni from the university and the college. But one of our challenges, there aren't that many cultural organisations, and to run a year-long programme, we had a bit of a believability issue about could Hull run 1,500 events across the year? Were there enough organisations? And one of the things we did do was call upon people who'd come through Hull, come through college, come through the university, and it's quite amazing when you start to look at the people that have done that. Tracy Seaward, you may never have heard of Tracy Seaward. She's a graduate of Hull College. Tracy Seaward produced a film called The Queen. She's just been nominated for an Oscar for a latest film, but she co-produced the Olympics opening ceremony with Danny Boyle, and we wanted somebody in our bid to co-produce a major opening event for City of Culture. We'd got somebody from Hull. And you start to look back in those alumni and the people that have contributed. We found that the managing director of Classic FM, Darren Henley, was from an alumni from the university. So that was part of our journey, was finding out the people who'd had contact and connections. And there's many, as you'll see today, that are now journalists and important journalists that wanted to write and say something about Hull. We also had to show that Hull had the venues, and it's quite remarkable. When you take a photograph of all the cultural venues in Hull, they're all really brilliant. There's fantastic, iconic venues, both quirky ones like, the Wellington, the Adelphi, some of the places like Pave, but also some of the traditional buildings like the City Hall. Hull has got some great architecture. This is what we were told. This is why we won the bid. We had very strong leadership from across the city, from lots of different partners. We told a compelling story, and I suppose my role was to find that story and to find Hull's place in the world and what it was that Hull could do that was unique and would be different from anyone else. There were 7 other ports bidding when we first started. So we couldn't just talk about being a port and a maritime city and all that. We had to find something else that summed up Hullness and the city. We had a great vision to the programme. It was very locally rooted, but it was global and international in its ambition. We really are going to reach out into everybody's homes, but we're also going to reach out to the world. And I was speaking this morning at the college about digital. And I'm old enough to remember in 1990, Glasgow was the European City of Culture. And it was fantastic. There was fantastic theatre in old warehouses. There was brilliant crafts projects. There was fantastic things. But back in 1990, there were 5 television channels. The only way you could find out about something in Glasgow City of Culture was a leaflet, or if you heard it on the radio or you read about it in the press. And really, you had to go to Glasgow to experience it. There was no World Wide Web. There was no email, really, in people's desks in 1990. There was certainly no Facebook and no Twitter. we have this enormous opportunity with City of Culture that we are on an international stage, that suddenly we can reach into everybody's homes, into everybody's pockets, the mobile phones. We can reach across the world and have a global audience. And you, as potential journalists, have that opportunity to help us in that and to be part of that journey. And it really is a very exciting time for Hull to be able to capitalise. Was probably the first city that's really been in that social media era. But this is where we started. I started work on this way back last February, and there'd been a poll in the Hull Daily Mail about how many people thought it should go for City of Culture, and the majority of people at that point were against it. And you'd got all this kind of history of negativity from national media, of the crap towns and these daft publications and surveys that come out. And we needed to change that conversation with the national media. So I am talking about PR. So it was my job and the City Council's communications team have been fantastic, to say, well, how are we going to change that conversation? What is the story we're going to tell? So once we put our bid in, we sat down and said, well, actually, who do we want to come up to Hull to write a story? And it really did need to be a kind of serious national newspaper to reposition what we were doing. And we got the Observer to come up and write a piece. And it was a very objective piece, and we showed them the city, and we presented ourselves as the serious bid. And it did start to just kind of change the perception. In fact, if you were a betting person, the odds for Hull to win was 16 to 1 that weekend. By the Monday, Ladbrokes had put a press release out to say the odds had been shortened on Hull to 6 to 1. And that's how powerful the press can be on something like this, a campaign. We then started to build a plan and to use events and public engagement and other things to create moments that would position the city. This was one quite quirky story that we planted. When I first came back to Hull, I was told about the fact that elephants used to walk through the city of Hull every day. So there was a zoological gardens in Hull, but the elephants that were in there used to live on the River Hull, and each day they'd be walked through the city and back. And in 1931, elephants were walked from Hull to Newcastle to show people in the north elephants. And there used to be elephants on the fair, and there was a model elephant in the park in Hull. So we decided to bring elephants back to the city streets, and we just created this stunt with a theatre company. Had a massive impact, just one small stunt of walking elephants back through the city. And we suddenly found that from being right at the back of the pack, because we didn't do Billy Connolly and Tom Daly, we were right at the front of the pack. And compared to the other cities, Hull was absolutely cleaning up on the national media and locally. And we had incredible support from the local media. So the local media were seen as partners, not just commentators in this process. And the Hull Daily Mail in particular were just sensational. And the BBC, who was supposed to be independent, probably gave us 5 times as much coverage in Hull as any of the other cities got. We created events like this, which was a projection on the deep, to show the quality of how can you talk about a programme that's 4 years away? Well, you just create a little moment that might be part of it. So one of the really fantastic ideas in the bid was looking up. Wherever you look up in Hull, there's something interesting architecture, or as it look down, there's a bomb site that hasn't been touched since the Second World War. 52 weeks of the year, 52 buildings. And we'll shine a light, or we'll compose a piece of music, or we'll do a piece of theatre, and the college is going to follow this with an app that takes you in kind of virtual reality around the history of the city. And we thought, let's create one of these. So week 1 might be a projection on the deep, and we created that. And again, it's just a visual moment, and the power of images. Nobody's talked about the power of images. I remember when I was a journalist on a newspaper in Yorkshire, I used to write these articles, and it used to take me ages to write them, because I'm not a very good writer. Write these articles, and then I'd send them a photograph, and I always got paid more for sending them the photograph than I got paid for writing the article. But photographs are incredibly powerful if you can get the right image behind a story. And this image was a projection on the deep of Richard Wilson, the sculptor's film. Richard Wilson made his sculpture for Heathrow Airport in Hull, and that was a kind of nice story for us, made in Hull, and we're kind of projecting that fact onto the deep. And we started to see this shift in attitudes. We were getting the public behind the social media campaign through Twitter and Facebook. And we did a survey in September through the People's Survey and found that there was 85% awareness of the City of Culture bid. Or was it 82% and 85% people were supportive of it. And that was a massive shift in the space of 8 months in terms of how the city perceived. And something was happening around the kind of pride in the city and pride of the place. And we needed to build on that and kind of show public support as we got to the final hurdle. And the thing that kind of clinched it was a film. How many people have seen the City of Culture film? I did think about bringing it along and showing it. Go onto YouTube and have a look at it if you've not seen it. Incredibly emotive film. And the background to this was we could go and present this bid to a panel of judges in Derry, but we could only take 6 people. So the vision was, let's take the people of Hull into that room. So we commissioned a film, we wrote a brief, and we commissioned a local film company to make this film. And the film had to sum up the diversity of the city, it had to sum up the kind of sense of freedom and space and light, it had to get across the cultural vibrancy of things, but it had to get across Hull and the people of Hull. And incredibly powerful film, which I think will go on to win awards. And it got 105,000 views on YouTube in the space of 3 weeks. Just incredible. And immediately got the population behind us. And then this happened. You know, we won, and there was a great warmth about Hull winning. There's the odd person sniping at us from London, but on the whole, there's been an enormous warmth and a kind of really welcoming. And people coming out, it's almost, you know, coming out of the closet, we love Hull. We think Hull's a great place. This is something you didn't know about Hull. And the success is phenomenal. So if you are in PR and you want to kind of study this, at some point we'll have an archive of it all. But there's been £7 million worth of media coverage about Hull and the bid. Over 1,000 articles and media interviews, almost universally positive. And the city's now being nominated for press and PR awards. We're suddenly finding that people are coming to visit us for different reasons than they might have done in the past. 29% increase on TripAdvisor views in the city, increase in occupancy in hotels, a new hotel being built, all because of the confidence that's come out of the bid. And the Hull Daily Mail had this heading, the day the city changed forever, and I thought it was a great heading. Not that winning a title of City of Culture literally changes everything in the city, and it won't tackle the fact that if you live at one end of Beverley Road, you'll live 10 years longer than if you live at the other end of Beverley Road. But actually culture can make a difference, and it can affect people's lives, and we can try and do something about those health issues and those education issues. But one of the key things was Hull was in the spotlight, and we're in the spotlight for 7 years, 3 years leading up and 3 years after. We've had newspapers that would never have come and written positive articles about the city here. We're big in Swansea, Dundee and Leicester, who are the runners-up. We're actually quite big in Aberdeen and Plymouth as well, who didn't even get on the shortlist. And we've been in lots of specialist press like Property News and Tourism Monthly and Horticultural Weekly. Everybody wants to write about Hull and to find an angle or a story within the bid and within the programme. And internationally, I had an email from somebody in Cambodia to say she'd just seen me on the telly. The BBC went absolutely worldwide, Sky went absolutely worldwide. We had Al Jazeera here in the city, we had the New York Times here in the city. Hull has suddenly got the opportunity in the next few years to really position itself internationally as the important city that it is. So it's kind of our chance, and I say our chance because it's your chance as well. It's our chance as a city. We think the nation's behind it. The world's watching. We do have the web. We do have social media. And Hull now needs to deliver. And that's about everybody in the city playing their part. And you coming through the college are coming through at a really privileged time to play a role in this. And I hope that many of you will write, whether you're here in the city or whether you're somewhere else. You'll write from a perspective of knowing this city and knowing what it can do and knowing the people and knowing how it can deliver. So that's the story of City of Culture, but the story is really only just started, and we've got about 1,000 days to go when we get to April the 7th. And one of the things I said this morning is, it's now the big thing is, social media and Twitter and Facebook and others and marketing sales. But by the time we get to 2017, there will be another media. There will be other things that you'll be writing for and delivering. And the main thing is you've got to be adaptable and creative, and that Hull has got to maybe find what some of those new media. We maybe will create our own new platforms, our own new ways of talking and telling the stories about Hull. And I look forward to many of you playing a part in that journey. Thank you. Sure, we're probably over time, but if there is any questions, I'll happily answer. Well, yeah. Yeah. Well, that was another thing that we actually got praised for in the bid. So we thought about the legacy right at the start, and we've actually raised money already for 2018. We've already got a budget in place for 2018. And I've described it as 2017, it's like putting the scaffolding up around the city. When we take the scaffolding down in 2018, the city's a bit stronger. People have got more experience of doing bigger events. People have got new skills. We've had 100 apprentices through the Cultural Apprenticeship Programme. We've built some of the cultural organisations up. We've added some new organisations. We've created new relationships. We've already got 22 sponsors. They've got relationships with cultural organisations. So the legacy is all of that you've built those relationships that actually, the BBC are going to be a massive partner in this. I'm already talking to drama, comedy, CBBC, BBC Online, 2 radio stations, BBC events. They're going to have a relationship with the city, and that's the legacy, that actually national broadcasters understand the city, national journalists understand the city, and hopefully the city understands how to work with those people as well. Someone at the back there? Yeah, it's a really good question. So the question is what happens between now and 2017. So there's a lot of press when we did the campaign, and there'll be a lot in the year. And Londonderry, who was City of Culture last year, had £100 million worth of press and media coverage. But for the first time, a baton's been handed over. So this hasn't happened before. With Glasgow, it was just in the year 1990. There was then an 18-year gap, and Liverpool was City of Culture in 2008, and it was just in the year. But Londonderry's handed a baton, so actually the focus is on Hull now, and we've got to maintain that and create the stories. It is a marathon, though, it's not a sprint, so we've got to pace things out and have kind of planned moments and special events. So we're creating 1 or 2 special events along the way. We'll be looking for cultural projects that might help tell the whole story on the journey there. But one of the dangers is that we burn out too quickly and we don't have to see. What can people do? I think you can start to write in different ways. And we're hearing earlier about writing on blogs. Start writing on blogs about what you believe in the city. Start writing about some of the fantastic cultural things that are happening here. The Heads Up Theatre Festival that's happening this week in the city. The new play at Hull Truck next week. It doesn't matter how many reviews you get of a theatre show. It's all good for the show, and it's good for you as writers to be practicing doing that. I started my limited career in journalism. No, I still occasionally write the odd thing. Actually, just doing reviews of shows, and then people started picking them up. And this was before the internet and things. People started picking up and paying me to do them. So if you're a good reviewer, we probably will set up a kind of formal young reviewer program to get people into a network of coming and seeing stuff and making sure that we are getting different perspectives on the culture that's happening here. It's really important we have a kind of young voice in the whole process. So there are things you can do today. You could go and see the show in the Heads Up Festival, or you could come next week to Hull Truck, or you could see something at the Freedom Festival and talk about it and write about it. In the middle? Yeah, there are. There'll be a really massive schools programme, but that isn't our priority at the moment. So we actually are next week just sitting down and kind of planning what our engagement is with schools. Everybody wants to talk to us now. Our priority at the moment is raising the money and setting up the national partnerships with the BBC and the Arts Council and various other people. And we'll return to schools and kind of community engagement later in the year. There is also a programme in the city called Roots and Wings, which has just got £3 million from the Arts Council for cultural-led community engagement. And that programme will be engaging with schools along the way as well. But we will have a kind of strategic and planned approach. We've visited every single school in the city as in some way as part of the bid, but we'll have a menu of things that schools can do. Gentleman at the back. Right, well, we're really interested in unrecognised artists and musicians and others, and that's one of the things that this is about. And a big part of it is building the capacity in the city. So one of the things I'm working on is a programme of events across the next 12 to 18 months, which will build capacity in the city. So there'll be opportunities for writers to come and meet the BBC. So the BBC are going to do a thing called the Insights Roadshow here, where people get an opportunity to understand how you write to the BBC, how you picture a programme idea, what people are looking for. Likewise, we'll be doing the same with the British Film Institute for people interested in working in film. So I hope there'll be a lot of projects and programmes along the way where you can kind of come and learn from others and get an understanding of how you get into writing for theatre or writing for TV. Well, we're probably all ready for lunch. So that was another one at the back, yeah?
Basically, I'm just wondering, I know there's a lot of venues around the whole of Hull, but is there any plans to make a large auditorium for staff like go to the auditorium, they have big artists coming in? We need big venues that bigger artists are coming here.
There isn't a specific plan to build an arena. In the kind of long-term vision for the city, I think there is. But we've got to be creative. One of the things Hull has got is fantastic open spaces. And it's actually got quite a good climate, and we can do events outside. So let's find those spaces and turn them into really kind of special places. Obviously, there's KC Stadium. We've got ideas in the bid to do things of a stadium scale. But they're incredible parks, they're incredible open spaces, so we'll use those. Derry spent £4 million on a tent for the year, a fantastic tent, really kind of brilliant, because they didn't have the venue. Hull's got other venues it can use, and we're looking at, where are the warehouses, where are the pea factories that aren't used all year round, where are the spaces that we can inhabit that really interesting things can happen. Okay, well, do take part, do go and see shows, do write about it, and thanks very much.